Live from Manhattan, the debate titled Rebuilding America's Cities, Policy versus Pandemonium, drew the attention of a nation already bracing for chaos. Cameras swept across the stage, landing on two figures who had become symbols of opposing futures. On the left stood Zohran Mamdani, the rising democratic socialist hailed by his supporters as the architect of a new urban revolution. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. On the right stood Karoline Leavitt, the former Trump appointee promising to restore order, integrity, and accountability to cities in free fall. The moderator hadn't even asked the first question before Mamdani leaned forward, jabbing a finger toward Karoline. "You represent fear?" he declared. "I represent freedom. Your ideas are a relic, mine are a revolution." The studio tightened like a held breath. Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she reached for the folder on her podium. Its cover stamped Federal Oversight Memo, Mamdani Campaign. She flipped it open, scanning with surgical precision before lifting it high enough for the cameras to catch. Her voice was cool, deliberate. "Are you here to lead?" she asked, her eyes locked onto his. "Or to burn this city down?" The audience fell silent. Even the moderator seemed unsure whether to intervene. This wasn't a debate. It was the opening shot of a reckoning. And if viewers believed cities needed leaders instead of chaos, they stayed glued to their screens, unaware that what was unfolding had begun weeks earlier. 3 weeks before the night America would remember, Karoline Leavitt received a plain white envelope with no official markings. Inside was a handwritten letter from Evelyn Morales, widow of an NYPD officer killed while responding to a robbery. Evelyn's words cut deeper than any political attack. Her husband had tried to de-escalate the situation unarmed. He was shot twice in the chest. A week later, Mamdani publicly referred to him as a tool of state oppression. Evelyn wrote, "My 10-year-old saw those words on his school tablet. He cried. I cried harder." Karoline held the letter for 20 minutes, absorbing every line. Before she could even set it down, her chief of staff arrived with an anonymous tip, a leaked internal memo titled Decarcerate by Disarmament, Phase 1. It outlined a radical plan: eliminate all NYPD funding within 100 days, retroactively remove prison sentences under 20 years, fully legalize all nonviolent drug use and sex work, and begin community transition toward full abolition. No explanation, no framework, just bullet points written with chilling confidence. Karoline didn't panic, she acted. She called a retired DOJ ethics lawyer, a mother who'd lost her teenage son to fentanyl poisoning in the Bronx, and an analyst who had tracked cartel infiltration across East Coast cities. Within 2 days, they met in a quiet building outside Washington, D.C. No cameras, no reporters, just spreadsheets, data charts, overdose mapping, and crime trend lines. The truth was horrifying. Cities that had piloted similar liberation frameworks saw violent crime spike, emergency response times double, overdoses triple, and homicide clearance rates collapse. Meanwhile, Mamdani escalated online warfare. On social media, he posted a black and white headshot of Karoline with the word fascist smeared across it in digital lipstick. His caption, "Watch her crumble on live TV. Progressives cheered." Late night hosts joked she was Margaret Thatcher with a TikTok. Karoline never responded. Silence was her strategy. The morning of the debate, she gathered her team backstage. "He wants chaos," she said simply. "Let him swing. Let him interrupt. He will reveal himself." Minutes later, a nervous producer knocked on her door. Mamdani had requested a rule change allowing direct cross-examination. Everyone expected her to refuse. She didn't. "Approve it," she said. Across the stage, Mamdani paced like a performer waiting for his cue, reciting lines he planned to deliver with righteous fury. When the cameras turned on, he lunged immediately, only to freeze as Karoline lifted the leaked memo. The audience gasped. Mamdani's rehearsed attacks evaporated. Karoline spoke first. "You call this liberation," she said, tapping the memo. "I call it abandonment." Mamdani stammered, trying to regain footing, insisting the document was a draft, a brainstorm, a misinterpretation, but Karoline didn't raise her voice. She simply read Evelyn's letter word for word. Viewers watched Mamdani's expression shift from annoyance to panic. By the time the moderator regained control, the narrative had flipped. Mamdani looked reckless, unprepared, exposed. Karoline stood steady, unshaken, the embodiment of controlled resolve. And as millions watched from living rooms, bars, and airport terminals across the country, they realized something no campaign strategist had predicted. This wasn't a battle of ideology, it was a battle of credibility, and only one person on that stage still had theirs intact. The moment the cameras cut to a wide shot, Mamdani tried to recover, forcing a smile that twitched at the edges. This is fear-mongering, he insisted, voice cracking despite his attempt at confidence. This memo is not policy. It's a conceptual framework for dismantling oppressive structures. But Karoline didn't blink. Oppressive structures, she repeated calmly. Tell that to the families burying their children because cartels moved in when police moved out. Tell that to Evelyn Morales. Tell it to every EMT who now arrives at scenes without backup because your movement said sirens traumatize communities. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even those who supported Mamdani felt the ground tilt beneath him. He attempted a counterattack, snapping, "Your policies criminalize poverty. You want to lock everyone up." Karoline raised a hand, not to silence him, but to steady the moment. "I want safety," she replied. "You want experiments." Mamdani scoffed. "Experiments built America. Not these ones," she said. "These ones destroy it." The moderator desperately tried to redirect, but the debate had left his control. Mamdani leaned forward, eyes blazing, jabbing his finger again. "You're lying to Americans. Cities need radical reimagining." Karoline stepped closer, closing the distance between their podiums. "Reimagine all you want," she said quietly, "but don't lie to the people who live with the consequences." The camera zoomed in on Mamdani's face as he swallowed hard, realizing he'd walked into a trap he'd thought he set for her. The leaked memo had rattled him, but Evelyn's letter had stripped him bare. Millions watching saw it. His confidence deflated, his bravado wilted under the weight of a mother's grief. When the moderator finally regained partial control, he introduced the next segment, cross-examination. Mamdani smiled too quickly, as if relieved to shift momentum. "Karoline," he began, "why do you think punishment solves societal decay? Why cage people when we can educate them?" Karoline kept her eyes locked on him. "Because education doesn't stop a bullet," she answered. "Because rehabilitation means nothing if the victim never comes home." Mamdani tried again. "What about systemic inequity?" "What about systemic accountability?" she countered. "What about neighborhoods where honest people can't sleep because the city is run by your theories instead of real solutions?" Mamdani gripped the edges of his podium. "People fear what they don't understand." Karoline didn't hesitate. "I understand perfectly," she said. "I understand that you want fewer police but more bureaucrats. You want open drug markets but closed prisons. You want victims erased so offenders can feel empowered." He shook his head wildly. "You're misrepresenting everything. I'm quoting your memo," she said, word for word. The moderator signaled to move on, but Mamdani insisted on continuing, desperate to regain control. "Your entire worldview is outdated," he argued. "You cling to structures that harm marginalized people." Karoline leaned in until the space between them felt electrically charged. "My worldview," she said softly, "is that a 10-year-old should not cry over strangers calling his dead father a tool of oppression. My worldview is that safety is not oppressive. My worldview is that order is not a threat, chaos is." The room fell silent again. Somewhere backstage, Mamdani's campaign manager put his head in his hands. Karoline's team, watching from the wings, remained still. They knew better than to celebrate too early. Mamdani cleared his throat, trying to salvage what was left. "You're exploiting tragedy. You're normalizing it," she replied, "and that's the difference between us." The final question of the night had been intended as a throwaway closer. What is your vision for America's cities? But it became the defining moment. Mamdani went first, speaking in sweeping abstractions about liberation, communal transformation, and the removal of oppressive institutions. His words hung in the air like smoke, pretty, vague, impossible to grasp. Then Karoline spoke, her voice steady, unembellished. "My vision," she said, "is that mothers stop writing letters like the one I received, that shop owners don't sweep blood off their sidewalks before opening, that police officers go home at night, that children make it to school without stepping over dealers, that cities become places where families thrive, not battlegrounds for political experiments. My vision," she repeated, "is safety. Without it, nothing else survives." The camera zoomed in as she finished. Mamdani looked stunned, as if he had just realized he wasn't in a debate. He was in a mirror, seeing the flaws in his movement reflected back at him. When the moderator thanked the candidates and signed off. The broadcast ended, but the shockwave did not. Within minutes, social media ignited, hashtags erupted, pundits scrambled, newsrooms buzzed, and viewers replayed the moment Karoline lifted the memo. It was clear to millions. Long before the analysts would say it aloud, the debate hadn't just shifted the political landscape, it had detonated it, and the aftershocks were only beginning. Backstage, chaos erupted before the candidates even cleared the curtains. Mamdani's campaign manager stormed toward him, whisper yelling with the desperation of a man trying to stop a political hemorrhage. Why didn't you pivot? Why did you let her read the letter? Why did you let the memo rattle you? Mamdani shoved him off. I didn't let anything rattle me. She ambushed me with propaganda. But even as he said it, he sounded unconvinced. He knew the panic clenching his chest wasn't from being ambushed. It was from being exposed. Across the hallway, Karoline walked with the stillness of someone who had not only prepared for the storm, but built shelter around every angle of it. Her team followed silently behind her, exchanging glances, but resisting the urge to celebrate. They knew she hated victory laps. Precision, not gloating, was her style. As they entered the green room, her chief of staff closed the door and whispered, "You just shifted the entire race." Karoline sat down, removed her earpiece, and took a slow breath. "No," she corrected. "I reminded people what reality looks like." Meanwhile, on the other side of the building, Mamdani was losing what little discipline he had left. He ripped off his microphone, threw it onto the table, and paced like a trapped animal. "She fabricated that memo. I never signed off on anything. It's not even final." His communications director stepped between him and the door. "Zohran, listen, that memo has metadata, version history, authenticated signatures. If she has the full file, not just the PDF, we are in trouble. Mamdani stopped, his throat tightened. "Who leaked it?" "We don't know," she said, "but someone in your senior circle had access." Mamdani's eyes widened with a mix of betrayal and fury. "Find them," he ordered, "tonight." But damage was already racing through the digital bloodstream of the nation. On Twitter, clips of the confrontation reached 1 million views in less than 10 minutes. The top comment read, "He came to start a revolution. She came with receipts." On Facebook, Evelyn Morales' letter had been posted by community groups around Queens, spreading through mothers' networks like wildfire. On TikTok, teenagers who couldn't name a single city council member were stitching the moment Karoline said, "Education doesn't stop a bullet." Even late-night hosts, usually loyal to Mamdani's ideology, stayed unusually quiet, unsure how to spin what had just unfolded. By the time Karoline left the studio and stepped into the waiting SUV, her phone was buzzing non-stop. Reporters, strategists, governors, even 2 former presidential candidates. She ignored them all. She rolled the widow's letter in her hands, rereading Evelyn's message under the streetlights flickering outside the window. "Are you ready to talk to the press?" her driver asked. "Not yet," she said. "Let them speak first." Hours later, well after midnight, Mamdani called an emergency meeting in his campaign headquarters. His senior advisors gathered around the long conference table, faces pale under fluorescent lights. "We need a counterpunch," Mamdani insisted. "We need to discredit her." His policy director shook his head. "You can't discredit a widow's letter." "Then discredit her sources," Mamdani snapped. "Call it fake. Call it manipulated." His digital strategist cut him off. "That won't work. The full memo is already circulating, verified," and the widow posted her own handwriting comparison. Mamdani slammed his fist on the table. Papers jumped. People flinched. "She set me up," he muttered. "She made me look weak." "You did that yourself," someone whispered from the far end. Everyone heard it. No one admitted to saying it. On the opposite side of the city, Karoline walked into her quiet apartment. She removed her shoes, set her phone on the table, and looked out the window at the lights of Manhattan. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even relieved. She felt something heavier, deeper, responsibility. Tomorrow would be worse. Tomorrow the counterattacks would begin. Tomorrow the narrative machines would roar awake. She brushed her fingers over Evelyn's letter once more and whispered, "This is only the beginning." And she was right, because while the country, slept while newsroom editors argued over headlines, while Mamdani spiraled deeper into paranoia. A new storm was forming, one that would drag both candidates into a battle no longer about policy, or crime, or urban renewal, but about truth itself, and America was about to choose which version they believed. By sunrise, the political world was already in open warfare. News anchors across every major network replayed the confrontation, pausing the footage frame by frame like analysts reviewing a prize fight. Karoline's calm precision, Mamdani's unraveling composure, the memo, the letter, the exchange heard around the country, opinion panels formed within hours, some praising Karoline for cutting through ideological fog, others insisting she exploited emotion. But across the spectrum, one sentiment kept resurfacing. Something had shifted. This wasn't just a debate, it was a fracture line. Mamdani's headquarters, meanwhile, had descended into a battlefield of whispered accusations and frantic damage control. His campaign chair called for a full internal audit. His communications director locked down all staff messaging. His digital team begged him not to tweet, but by 7:14 a.m., he did anyway. I will not let bad faith actors derail the movement. Tonight was a smear. We will rise higher. The post was ratioed within minutes. The top reply read, "She didn't smear you. She read your memo." While Mamdani fought shadows, Karoline prepared for the day. She dressed in silence, tying her hair back with the same deliberate control she'd shown on stage. When she stepped into her living room, her phone vibrated again, this time from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Ms. Leavitt?" An unfamiliar voice asked, low and cautious. "I think you should know. Mamdani's team is trying to find the whistleblower. They're panicking. They're going to start making accusations by noon." Karoline's spine straightened. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants the truth to survive," the voice replied before the line clicked dead. She stared at the phone, her breath steady but her pulse heavy. There was no time to process it. Her chief of staff arrived moments later with a folder of early polling reactions. "You need to see this," he said, placing the papers on the table. Overnight support had swung hard. Voters who previously leaned neutral now listed safety, order, and credibility as their top concerns. Independents were shifting. Even some left-leaning urban districts showed unexpected pivots. But what caught Karoline's attention wasn't the rise in her numbers. It was the plunge in his. Mamdani's approval had dropped double digits in 12 hours. Not because of ideology, not because of policy, but because millions had watched him falter. And once voters see a fracture, they look for more. Across town, Mamdani sat alone in his office as staff argued outside his door. His hands trembled slightly as he replayed the clip of Karoline reading the widow's letter. Not the memo, not the confrontation, just that single moment. He could not escape it. The grief in Evelyn's words, the audience's reaction, the way his own face had tightened, then cracked. He hated it. He hated her for it. And he hated himself most of all for giving her that opening. A knock echoed from the door. His campaign manager walked in with the expression of someone delivering bad news he couldn't soften. "Zohran, you need to address the memo." "I already denied it," Mamdani barked. "Denying isn't enough," the manager said. "There's more coming." "More what?" Mamdani demanded. The manager closed the door. "There's another document." Mamdani froze. "From the same leak?" "We think so. It's circulating privately. If she gets it before we do, we're finished." Mamdani stood abruptly, knocking over a stack of papers. "Then get it first." Meanwhile, Karoline's team gathered around her in a secure briefing room provided by the network. Her intelligence analyst, the same one who'd spotted cartel patterns, slid a manila envelope across the table. "This came through our encrypted drop this morning," he said. "Same whistleblower. It's not the memo, it's worse." Karoline opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. Her jaw tightened. The room fell into stunned silence. Her chief of staff whispered, "If this is real, Mamdani is done." Karoline closed the folder, her voice steady. "It's real, and we are not releasing it." The entire team snapped their heads toward her. "But this destroys him," one advisor argued. "It exposes everything." Karoline shook her head. "This isn't about destroying him. It's about saving the city. We release this now. It turns into a circus. It becomes about the scandal, not the stakes." "So what do we do?" her analyst asked. Karoline stood, sliding the envelope into her briefcase. "We wait, and when he lies again, when he denies again, when he claims to be the defender of vulnerable communities, then we choose our moment." Outside the building, reporters flooded the sidewalk, shouting questions as she approached the SUV. "Ms. Leavitt, did you expect last night's reaction? Do you have a response to Mamdani's statement?" Is there more information coming? Karoline paused at the car door. She didn't smile. She didn't grandstand. She simply said, "The truth has a timetable. It always arrives." She stepped into the vehicle and the door closed behind her. Inside her office, miles away, Mamdani stared at his reflection in the window. He didn't know it yet, but the timetable had already begun. If you like this video, then subscribe.